What if the reason you feel overwhelmed, distracted, or constantly chasing peace isn't because life is too hard, but because you've never been taught how to control your mind? Because the truth is, every single day you are being pulled in 100 different directions by emotions, by people, by circumstances you cannot control. And without realizing it, you become a reaction to life instead of the master of it. And as revealed in the Daily Stoic, the difference between those who crumble under pressure and those who remain calm, focused, and powerful is not luck, it is discipline. The discipline of how they think, how they act, and how they endure. Because Stoicism is not about ignoring emotions or avoiding life. It is about gaining control over the only thing you truly own, your mind. And once you understand this, everything begins to change. Because you stop trying to control the uncontrollable, you stop wasting energy on things that don't matter. And you start focusing on what truly does, your thoughts, your actions, and your responses. And this is where real power begins. Because while most people are driven by impulse, fear, and distraction, you become driven by clarity, purpose, and discipline. And this is what creates an unfair advantage in every area of life, whether it's your career, your relationships, or your finances. Because the same mind that can stay calm under pressure can also make better decisions. The same discipline that controls emotions can also control spending, habits, and long-term thinking. And this is why Stoicism is not just philosophy, it is a system for success. A way to build resilience, clarity, and financial freedom at the same time. Because when you stop reacting emotionally, you start acting intentionally. When you stop chasing comfort, you start building strength. And when you stop fearing uncertainty, you start mastering it. And this is the shift that changes everything. Because life will never be perfect. Circumstances will never be fully in your control. But your response always can be. And the moment you take control of that, you don't just improve your life, you take ownership of it completely. Imagine waking up every single day with absolute clarity, no chaos in your mind, no emotional storms controlling your actions, no fear of the future, no regret about the past, just calm, focused control over your thoughts, your decisions, and your life. Because what if I told you that the difference between a peaceful, powerful life and a stressed, reactive one comes down to a single skill, the ability to control how you see the world? And as revealed in the Daily Stoic, this is not a modern discovery. This is ancient wisdom practiced by emperors, warriors, leaders, and thinkers who face challenges far greater than most of us will ever encounter. Yet they remained steady, disciplined, and unshaken, not because life was easy, but because they mastered themselves. And this is where everything begins to shift. Because the Stoics teach us that you don't control what happens to you. You control how you respond to it. You don't control the external world, but you fully control your internal one, your thoughts, your perceptions, your actions, and your will. And once you understand that, once you truly accept it, you stop wasting energy on things that don't matter, you stop reacting emotionally to every situation, and you start living with intention, clarity, and purpose. And this is the hidden advantage that separates those who struggle from those who thrive. Because while most people are distracted, overwhelmed, and controlled by their circumstances, the Stoic becomes calm in chaos, focused in distraction, and powerful in uncertainty. And this is not just philosophy. This is a practical system for living, a daily discipline that shapes how you think, how you act, and how you endure, because every day presents challenges, distractions, frustrations, and opportunities, and the question is not whether these will happen. Whether these will happen, they do, and this is where the three disciplines come into play: perception, act, and will, the foundation of Stoic mastery. Because when you control your perception, you see reality clearly, without distortion, without emotional bias. When you control your actions, you do what is right, regardless of how you feel. And when you control your will, you endure what you cannot change with strength and acceptance. And this is where true power lies, not in controlling the world, but in controlling yourself. And this is where the connection to financial freedom becomes clear. Because the same discipline that allows you to control your emotions also allows you to control your spending, your habits, your decisions, and your long-term thinking. Because wealth is not just about money, It is about discipline, patience, and clarity, the ability to delay gratification, to make rational decisions, and to stay consistent over time. And this is why so many people struggle financially, not because they lack opportunity, but because they lack control over their impulses, their desires, and their habits. And this is exactly what Stoicism trains you to master. Because when you can control yourself, you can control your outcomes. And when you can control your outcomes, you can design your life. And this is where the journey begins. Not with changing the world, but with changing how you see it, how you respond to it, and how you show up in it every single day. And the question is, are you ready to stop reacting to life and start mastering it? As you move deeper into this journey, you begin to realize that the greatest battle you will ever fight is not out there in the world. It is within you, in your thoughts, your reactions, your judgments, and your ability to remain steady when everything around you feels uncertain. Because as revealed throughout the Daily Stoic, life does not become easier, the world does not become more predictable, and people do not suddenly start behaving the way you want them to. But what can change, what must change, is how you perceive all of it. Because perception is where your power begins, and most people never take control of it. They allow their emotions to distort reality. They allow fear to exaggerate problems. They allow anger to cloud judgment, and as a result, they suffer not because of what happens, but because of how they interpret what happens. And this is where the Stoic discipline of perception becomes your greatest advantage. Because when you learn to see things clearly without emotional interference, you gain a level of calm and control that most people never experience. And this is why Epictetus taught that the problem is not the event itself, but the story you tell yourself about it. Because two people can experience the same situation and respond in completely different ways. One sees opportunity, the other sees disaster. One remains calm, the other panics. And the difference is not the situation, it is the perception. And this is where you must begin to train your mind, to question your initial reactions, to pause before you judge, to separate facts from emotions, and to ask yourself, is this really as bad as I think? Or is my mind exaggerating it? And this simple shift, this moment of awareness, gives you control, because instead of reacting automatically, you respond intentionally. And this is where clarity replaces chaos. Because when you remove emotional distortion, you begin to see reality as it is, not as you fear it to be. And this is where another powerful insight emerges, that most of your stress comes from trying to control things that are not within your control. And this is one of the core teachings of Stoicism, the understanding that there are things you can control and things you cannot. And suffering comes from confusing the two, because when you try to control what is uncontrollable, you create frustration, anxiety, and disappointment. But when you focus only on what is within your control, your thoughts, your actions, your responses, you create clarity, confidence, and peace. And this is where your energy becomes more focused, more effective, and more productive. Because instead of wasting it on external circumstances, you invest it in your internal state. And this is one of the most powerful financial freedom principles you can apply. Because just as you must control your thoughts, you must also control your financial behavior, your spending, your investing, your habits, and your discipline. Because wealth is not created by external conditions alone, it is created by internal control, by the ability to make rational decisions, to delay gratification, and to stay consistent over time. And this is where most people fail. They react emotionally to money. They spend impulsively. They invest based on fear or hype. And as a result, they create financial instability. But when you apply Stoic discipline, when you remove emotion from your decisions, when you focus on long-term thinking and consistent action, you create financial stability and growth. And this is where perception becomes not just a mental tool, but a life strategy. Because how you see things determines how you act, and how you act determines your results. And this is why Marcus Aurelius constantly reminded himself to see things objectively, to strip away the story, to remove the judgment, and to focus on what is real. Because when you do that, you remove unnecessary suffering, you reduce stress, and you create a sense of calm that allows you to think clearly and act effectively. And this is where another important practice comes into play. The ability to reframe challenges, because instead of seeing obstacles as problems, you begin to see them as opportunities to grow, to learn, and to strengthen your character. And this is not about blind optimism, it is about practical realism, because every challenge contains a lesson, every difficulty contains an opportunity, and when you train your mind to look for those opportunities, you transform adversity into advantage, and this is where resilience is built. Because instead of being overwhelmed by challenges, you become stronger because of them. And this is where the Stoic mindset becomes incredibly powerful, because it allows you to remain steady in a world that is constantly changing, to remain calm in situations that would normally create stress, and to remain focused when others are distracted. And this is where your competitive advantage lies, because while others are reacting emotionally, you are thinking clearly. While others are overwhelmed, you are composed, and while others are stuck, you are moving forward with intention. And this is where your life begins to change, not because the world has changed, but because you have, because you now see things differently. You respond differently, and you act differently. And as you continue on this path, remember this powerful truth: you have power over your mind. Not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Because when you truly understand this, when you live by it daily, you unlock a level of control, clarity, and confidence that transforms not just your mindset, but your entire life, one perception at a time. As you continue forward, you begin to understand that clarity of perception is only the beginning, because seeing the world correctly is powerful, but it is not enough on its own. What truly defines your life is what you do next, your actions, your decisions. The way you behave when faced with opportunity, pressure, or adversity. And as revealed in the Daily Stoic, the discipline of action is where philosophy becomes reality, where thought becomes behavior, and where intention becomes result, because it is not what you think that shapes your life. It is what you do consistently. And this is where many people fall short. They understand what is right, they know what they should do, but they fail to act, they hesitate, they procrastinate, they allow fear, doubt, or comfort to hold them back. And as a result, their lives remain unchanged. Because knowledge without action is useless, it is potential without execution. And this is why the Stoics placed such a strong emphasis on action, not just any action, but right action, deliberate action, action guided by reason, purpose, and virtue, because every moment presents a choice. A choice to act with discipline or with impulse, with integrity or with convenience, with purpose or with distraction. And these choices, repeated over time, define who you become. And this is where the concept of duty becomes central, because the Stoics believe that each person has a role to play, a responsibility to fulfill, not just to themselves, but to others, to society, and to the greater whole. And when you understand this, when you embrace your responsibilities instead of avoiding them, your actions take on a new level of meaning. Because you are no longer acting just for personal gain, you are acting with purpose, with intention, and with a sense of contribution. And this is where fulfillment begins to replace emptiness, because true satisfaction does not come from avoiding difficulty. It comes from engaging with it, from doing what is required, from showing up fully and giving your best effort, regardless of the circumstances. And this is where discipline becomes your greatest ally, because right action often requires doing what is hard, what is uncomfortable, what is inconvenient. And most people avoid these things. They choose the easy path, the comfortable option, the immediate reward. But over time, these choices lead to stagnation, to regret, and to unfulfilled potential. And this is why Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily to focus on the task in front of him, to do it with excellence, with attention, and with purpose. Because when you approach each action as if it matters, as if it is your last, you bring a level of focus and intensity that transforms even the simplest tasks into meaningful contributions. And this is where the idea of present action becomes powerful, because instead of being distracted by the past or anxious about the future, you focus on what you can do right now in this moment with the resources and abilities you have, and this is where progress is made. Not in grand plans or distant goals, but in small, consistent actions taken daily. And this is one of the most important financial freedom principles you can apply, because wealth is not created through occasional effort. It is created through consistent, disciplined action, through saving regularly, investing wisely, improving your skills, and making decisions that align with your long-term goals. And this requires the same discipline as Stoic action, the ability to do what is right, not what is easy, to think long-term instead of short-term, and to remain consistent even when results are not immediately visible. And this is where most people fail financially. They act impulsively, they chase quick gains, they avoid discipline, and as a result, they create instability instead of growth. But when you apply Stoic principles, when you act with reason, patience, and consistency, you build a foundation that leads to lasting success. And this is where another powerful insight emerges. That action must be guided by values, because without values, action becomes chaotic, reactive, and inconsistent. But when your actions are guided by principles such as integrity, discipline, and responsibility, they become aligned. Focused and effective, and this is where your life begins to take shape not randomly, but intentionally. Because every action you take is a step toward the person you are becoming, and this is why the Stoics emphasize self-awareness, the ability to reflect on your actions, to evaluate your behavior, and to continuously improve, because growth is not automatic. It requires attention, effort, and adjustment. And this is where daily reflection becomes a powerful practice, because by reviewing your actions, by asking yourself what you did well, what you could improve, and how you can do better tomorrow, you create a cycle of continuous improvement. And this is where mastery is built not in one moment, but over time through consistent effort and reflection. And this is where your actions begin to align with your goals, your values, and your vision, creating a life that is not just successful but meaningful. And as you continue on this path, remember this powerful truth: waste no more time arguing about what a good person should be. Be one, because in the end, it is not your thoughts, your intentions, or your plans that define you. It is your actions. And when you commit to acting with purpose, discipline, and integrity every single day, you begin to build a life that reflects your highest potential, one action at a time. As you move further along this path, something deeper begins to unfold. Something that goes beyond how you see the world and how you act within it. Something that defines how you endure what you cannot control, how you respond when life does not go your way, when plans fail, when loss occurs, when uncertainty becomes unavoidable. And this is where the third discipline of Stoicism reveals its true power, the discipline of will. Because as taught throughout the Daily Stoic, no matter how disciplined your perception is and no matter how strong your actions are, there will always be forces outside your control, events you cannot predict, outcomes you cannot change, and moments that will test your patience, your resilience, and your inner strength. And this is where most people break, because they resist reality. They fight against what is, they complain, they become frustrated, and in doing so, they create unnecessary suffering, not because of the situation itself, but because of their resistance to it. And this is where the Stoic mindset offers a completely different approach, one that is both powerful and liberating. The idea that instead of resisting what happens, you accept it, not passively, not with defeat, but with strength, with understanding, and with the recognition that some things are simply beyond your control. And this is where the concept of amor fati becomes essential, the love of faith, the ability to not just accept what happens, but to embrace it, to see it as part of your journey, part of your growth, and part of the path that is shaping you into who you are meant to become. And this is not easy. It requires practice. It requires discipline. And it requires a shift in perspective, because instead of asking, why is this happening to me? You begin to ask, how can I use this? What can I learn from this? How can this make me stronger? And this shift transforms adversity into opportunity, because every challenge becomes a chance to build resilience, to develop character, and to strengthen your ability to endure. And this is where true power lies, not in avoiding difficulty, but in facing it with courage and composure. And this is why the Stoics believe that obstacles are not barriers, they are the path, because it is through difficulty that you grow, it is through struggle that you develop strength, and it is through adversity that you discover what you are truly capable of. And this is where another important realization emerges, that suffering is often amplified by your resistance to it. Because when you fight reality, when you wish things were different, when you refuse to accept what is, you create internal conflict, stress, and frustration. But when you accept reality as it is, when you align yourself with it, you remove that resistance. And in doing so, you find peace, not because the situation has changed, but because your relationship to it has changed. And this is where the discipline of will becomes transformative, because it allows you to remain steady in the face of uncertainty, to remain calm in the face of chaos, and to remain strong in the face of adversity. And this is where resilience becomes your greatest asset, because life will test you, it will challenge you. It will present situations that are beyond your control, and your ability to endure these situations with strength and composure will determine your success, not just in life, but also in your financial journey. Because financial freedom is not just about making money. It is about managing uncertainty, dealing with setbacks, and staying consistent even when things do not go as planned. Because markets fluctuate, opportunities come and go, and unexpected challenges arise. And those who succeed are not the ones who avoid these challenges, but the ones who endure them, who remain disciplined, who stay focused, and who continue to act with intention despite uncertainty. And this is where Stoic resilience becomes a financial advantage, because when you are not driven by fear, when you are not shaken by temporary setbacks, you are able to make rational decisions, to stay committed to your long-term goals, and to avoid the emotional reactions that lead to poor financial choices. And this is where another powerful principle comes into play. That time and patience are your greatest allies, because just as Stoicism teaches you to endure the present moment, financial success requires you to endure the process, to stay consistent, to trust the long term, and to avoid the temptation of short-term thinking. And this is why the discipline of will is so important, because it allows you to remain steady over time, to continue moving forward even when progress is slow, and to maintain your focus despite distractions and setbacks. And this is where your character is built. Because character is not formed in moments of ease, it is formed in moments of difficulty, in the choices you make when things are hard, in the way you respond when things do not go your way. And this is where your true strength is revealed, not in what you can control, but in how you handle what you cannot. And as you continue on this journey, remember this powerful truth: the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Because when you learn to embrace challenges, to accept reality, and to endure with strength and purpose, you unlock a level of resilience that allows you to move forward no matter what obstacles you face. And that is where true freedom begins, not in controlling the world, but in mastering your response to it. As you move into this stage of your journey, something subtle yet profoundly powerful begins to take shape. Something that ties together how you think, how you act, and how you endure. And that is the realization that mastery is not built in extraordinary moments, but in ordinary days, in the quiet, consistent discipline of showing up, reflecting, and refining yourself over and over again. Because as revealed throughout the Daily Stoic, the goal is not perfection. The goal is progress. The goal is to become slightly better each day, slightly more aware, slightly more disciplined, slightly more aligned with your values. And this is where the practice of daily reflection becomes essential, because without reflection there is no awareness. And without awareness, there is no growth. And this is why the Stoics treated each day as a complete cycle, a beginning and an end. A chance to prepare in the morning and a chance to review in the evening, because life is not just lived, it is examined, it is studied, it is refined through conscious attention. And this is where most people miss the opportunity, because they rush through their days, reacting, responding, moving from one task to another without ever stopping to ask themselves what they are doing, why they are doing it, and whether it is aligned with the life they want to create. And as a result, they drift, they repeat the same mistakes, they remain stuck in the same pattern, not because they lack potential, but because they lack awareness. And this is where the Stoic practice becomes transformative. Because when you begin to observe yourself, when you begin to question your actions, your thoughts, and your behaviors, you create a feedback loop, a system of continuous improvement that allows you to adjust, to refine, and to grow over time. And this is where journaling becomes a powerful tool, because by writing down your thoughts, your experiences, and your reflections, you make them visible. You bring them into your conscious awareness. And once something is visible, it can be changed. And this is why Marcus Aurelius wrote his Meditations, not for others, but for himself, as a way to remind himself of the principles he wanted to live by, as a way to correct his thinking, to realign his actions, and to strengthen his discipline. And this is a practice you can adopt because every day presents lessons, every day presents opportunities to improve, and when you take the time to reflect, to ask yourself what you did well, what you could do better, and what you will do differently tomorrow, you create a cycle of growth that compounds over time. And this is where the connection to financial freedom becomes clear once again. Because just as you must track your thoughts and actions, you must also track your finances, your spending, your investments, and your habits. Because what gets measured gets improved, and when you bring awareness to your financial behavior, you gain control over it, you can identify patterns, eliminate waste, and make decisions that align with your long-term goals. And this is one of the most powerful principles of wealth building. That awareness leads to control, and control leads to growth, and this is where discipline becomes your greatest asset, not as a restriction, but as a form of freedom. Because when you are disciplined, you are not controlled by impulses, by distractions, or by external pressures. You are guided by your values, your goals, and your principles, and this creates a sense of stability, a sense of direction, and a sense of confidence that allows you to navigate life with clarity and purpose. And this is where another important insight emerges, that growth is not linear. It is not always visible, and it is not always easy. There will be days when you feel like you are making progress, and there will be days when you feel like you are falling behind, but what matters is not the immediate result. What matters is the consistency of your effort, the commitment to your practice, and the willingness to continue even when it feels difficult. And this is where patience becomes essential, because just as the Stoics teach you to accept what you cannot control, they also teach you to trust the process, to understand that meaningful change takes time, and that the results of your efforts will appear when they are ready, not when you demand them. And this is where the principle of compounding applies once again, because small daily improvements, when repeated over time, lead to significant transformation, whether in your mindset, your habits, or your financial situation. And this is why the Stoic path is not about quick wins or instant gratification. It is about long-term growth, about building a life that is stable, meaningful, and aligned with your values. And this requires consistency, discipline, and reflection. And this is where your daily routine becomes your greatest tool. Because the way you start your day, the way you structure your time, and the way you end your day all contribute to your overall progress. And this is why creating intentional rituals, moments of reflection, moments of focus, moments of stillness can have a profound impact on your life, because they create structure, and structure supports discipline, and discipline supports growth. And this is where your life begins to change, not through dramatic shifts, but through small, consistent actions taken every day. And as you continue on this path, remember this powerful truth. You don't improve your life by chance. You improve it by change, and that change does not happen once. It happens daily in the choices you make, in the actions you take, and in the way you reflect, learn, and grow. Because when you commit to this process, when you make self-improvement a daily practice, you create a life that is not only successful, but intentional, balanced, and deeply fulfilling, one day at a time. And now, as you reach this final stage, everything begins to come together in a way that feels both simple and profound, because you start to see that this is not just philosophy. This is a way of living, a way of thinking, a way of moving through the world with clarity, discipline, and inner strength. And as revealed throughout the Daily Stoic, the ultimate goal is not to control life, but to master yourself within it. Because life will always be unpredictable. Circumstances will always change. Challenges will always arise. But your ability to remain steady, focused, and intentional is what determines your experience. And this is where the true power of Stoicism reveals itself, not in isolated moments of calm, but in the consistency of your character, in the way you show up every single day, regardless of what is happening around you. And this is where you begin to understand that greatness is not about intensity, it is about consistency. It is about the quiet discipline of doing what is right day after day, without the need for recognition, without the need for immediate results. Because you know that the process itself is what shapes you, and this is where your identity transforms, because you are no longer someone who reacts to life. You become someone who responds with intention, someone who acts with purpose, someone who endures with strength. And this is where your life begins to align because your thoughts, your actions, and your values are no longer in conflict. They are working together, creating a sense of clarity, stability, and direction that most people never experience. And this is where true freedom begins. Not the freedom to do whatever you want, but the freedom from being controlled by your impulses, your emotions, and your external circumstances. And this is the highest form of freedom because it cannot be taken from you. It does not depend on money, status, or conditions. It comes from within. From your ability to govern yourself, and this is where the connection to financial freedom becomes deeper and more meaningful, because true wealth is not just about accumulation, it is about control over your decisions, your habits, your desires, and your long-term thinking. Because without discipline, money becomes a source of stress, of instability, of poor decisions, but with discipline, it becomes a tool, a resource that you can manage wisely, grow consistently, and use intentionally. And this is why the Stoic mindset is one of the most powerful financial advantages you can develop, because it allows you to remain rational in moments of uncertainty, to avoid emotional decisions, to stay focused on long-term growth, and to maintain consistency even when results are slow. And this is where the principle of enough becomes essential, because the Stoics teach that happiness is not found in having more, but in needing less, in being content with what you have while still striving to improve, and this creates a balance. A sense of satisfaction that is not dependent on external conditions, and this is what allows you to build wealth without losing yourself in the process, to pursue success without becoming consumed by it. And this is where another powerful truth emerges, that time is your most valuable asset. More valuable than money, more valuable than status, because it is limited, it is finite, and once it is gone, it cannot be recovered. And this is why the Stoics place such importance on how you spend your time, on focusing on what truly matters, on eliminating distractions, and on living with intention, because every moment is an opportunity to act with purpose, to think clearly and to grow. And this is where the concept of mortality becomes a source of clarity, not fear, because when you remember that your time is limited, you begin to prioritize what truly matters. You stop wasting time on trivial things, and you start living with urgency, with focus, and with meaning. And this, where your life begins to shift from reactive to intentional, from distracted to focused, from chaotic to controlled. And this is where the Stoic path leads you, not to perfection, but to progress. Not to ease, but to strength, not to avoidance of challenges, but to mastery over them. And as you continue forward, remember this powerful truth. You have one life, one mind, and one set of choices, and how you use them will determine everything, because in the end, it is not what happens to you that defines your life. It is how you think, how you act, and how you endure. And when you master these, you don't just improve your life, you transform it completely, one day, one decision, and one disciplined thought at a time.